Wernher von Braun ran NASA's Saturn rocket program for the first Mercury missions through the alleged Apollo missions to the moon. Just as NASA was beginning to be developed to allegedly counter the Russians, who were said to be the first in space, resulting in the Great Space Race, von Braun had plenty of time to go to Hollywood and collaborate with Paramount Pictures and Walt Disney to sell space travel to the public. Man in Space was the pre-programming of the public to accept vast sums of expenditures to counter the Cold War evil empire. It is common knowledge that before coming to NASA, von Braun was the wunderkind leader of the V-2 or Vengeance 2 rocket program for the Germans during World War II. According to a 2011 BBC documentary, the attacks resulted in the deaths of an estimated 9,000 civilians and military personnel, while 12,000 forced laborers and concentration camp prisoners were killed producing the weapons. So let's get back to the beginnings of NASA in 1958, where every photo and every story of space exploration has come from for over the past 50 years. The first NASA administrator in 1958 was Dr. Thomas Keith Glennon. Previously to NASA, he was the studio manager for 10 years at Paramount Studios in Hollywood. Then from 1942 to 47, he was administrator and director of the U.S. Naval Underwater Sound Laboratory, and then after the war was production manager for the photographic film manufacturing company ANSCO, also known as GAF. His work in movie making and underwater photography came in handy to fake the Apollo moon missions and spacewalks. Here is the massive underwater neutral buoyancy laboratory in Houston, Texas, which is said to facilitate astronauts with near weightlessness in space, but has been used for decades to facilitate fake space moon footage. Secret societies have been part of the occult or hidden hand of preserving the great lie since the beginning. How cool or powerful it would be for secret societies' recruiting purposes if you could tell your new first 3-degree blue members that Buzz Aldrin, the second man we are sold had stepped on the moon, had planted a Scottish Rite Freemason flag on there. From George Washington and his laying of the cornerstones of the White House to many U.S. presidents like Harry S. Truman, many have been Freemasons. So to fake an Apollo moon landing, one Kenneth or Kenny S. Kleinecht managed the Apollo space missions from the beginning until retiring to Lockheed Corp in 1981. He is a 33-degree Mason, and for his great work at NASA and the Apollo fake moon missions, he then became the sovereign Grand Commander and titular head of all Scottish Rite Masons throughout the world. Make no mistake, the powers that run NASA are co-joined, run, and controlled by the military and secret societies of the New World Order, and always have been in modern times. Using Hollywood, whose name comes from the holly tree used by the ancient Druids for black magic, as well as known celebrities to promote their sun-worshipping Horus snake ways, as they show off their serpent tongues to mock those without eyes to see or ears to hear the hidden truth about what is really going on in our world today.
There is one more critical piece to the founding of NASA. Jack Whiteside Parsons, who JPL, Jack Parsons Laboratories, was named, was considered the father of rocketry. Also joining him were some very nefarious characters in the founding of NASA. We see the complete dream team here of Aleister Crowley, a very well-known occultist, dark magic, black magic person, Jack Parsons, who we just mentioned, R. Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard, founder of Scientology, Wernher von Braun, V-2 rocket program, Nazi Germany, and the fantasy creator Walt Disney. Now looking at Whiteside Parsons, he was an occultist, black magician, Satanist, head of Ordo Templi Orientis California Agape Lodge. Crowley, 33-degree Freemason, leader of the Ordo Templi Orientis, black magician, Satanist, the Beast 666. L. Ron Hubbard, mass mind controller, black magician, Satanist, founder of the Church of Scientology cult. Wernher von Braun, who we talked about, and Mr. Walt Disney, who everybody knows about, who's also a known Illuminati and helped with the pedophile Magic Kingdom 33 and all the underground caves at Disney and the mind control programming. So it's quite a group that founded NASA here. Additionally, in 1958, we find that the first solar panels were created. Again, the Arctic Treaty System was founded. The United Nations was founded. Few know that the U.S. deployed atomic weapons, or said to have deployed atomic weapons in 1958 in Korea at the end of the Korean War, again, probably to promote the Red Scare. And then just we have the Van Allen Belt discovery by satellite explorers 1 and 3. And then very interestingly, the United States completed 6 high-altitude nuclear tests in 1958, but they raised a number of questions. According to the U.S. government report, quote, previous high-altitude nuclear tests, the Teak, the Orange, and the Yucca, plus 3 Argus shots were poorly instrumented and hastily executed. Despite thorough studies of the meager data, present models of these bursts are sketchy and tentative. When they got up to the Van Allen belts, did they lose communications? 1961, nuclear test ban is lifted with Russia to test high-altitude weapons. Now, why did they lift the ban when we're beginning to enter into a space race? The Antarctic Treaty System is ratified and signed. The ASPA, which is the Antarctic Special Protection Agency, could be protecting the HARP facilities down there. JFK announces space mission to the moon. Cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. Alan Shepard, the first American in space in a 15-minute suborbital flight. And few are aware that Russia is said to have launched an Explorer probe to Venus. And even fewer are aware that in a speech, J.F. Kennedy stated that there's already a satellite from the United States heading to Venus in 1961.
To be sure, we are behind, and will be behind for some time in manned flight. But we do not intend to stay behind, and in this decade we shall make up and move ahead. This is a breathtaking pace, and such a pace cannot help but create new ills as it dispels old. New ignorance, new problems, new dangers.
So, Nuking the Dome, 1962, Operation Dominic. Operation Dominic was a series of 31 nuclear test explosions conducted in 1962. It occurred during a period of the high Cold War tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Also, the Bay of Pigs invasion had occurred just recently and was on the minds as well. Khrushchev announced the end of the 3-year moratorium on nuclear testing on August 30th, 1961, and immediately thereafter, on September 1st, he initiated a series of tests that included the initiation of SAR bombs up into the upper atmosphere. Kennedy responded immediately by authorizing Operation Dominic, the largest nuclear weapons testing program ever conducted by the United States, and the last atmospheric test series conducted by the U.S., as a limited test ban treaty was signed in Moscow the following year. So this small window, they start blasting up in space with thermonuclear weapons. What were they doing? Why were they doing this? What were they trying to find? Dominic was the largest and most elaborate testing operation ever conducted. The diagnostic stations receiving data from the test covered more than 15 million square miles, 28,000 military and civilian personnel, 200 tons of supplies were shipped and airlifted to the test areas. This was a major operation, just like down to the Antarctic. The Thor missile was used to lift warheads into near space to conduct the high-altitude nuclear test explosions. These shots were collectively called Operation Fishbowl. Now, do you remember in your mythology who Thor was? You may recall that Thor in ancient Nordic mythology is the red-bearded son of Odin, of the Norse Hercules, and he's armed with his war hammer and a belt of strength, and he tends to flatten whatever grows inflated beyond natural limits, particularly greedy giants. His chariot is pulled by the goats, Toothgrinder and Snarltooth, and his lightning is located in the place of might. Thor safeguards important demarcations while breaking open those that unduly block or limit.
Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C. Look up Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C, from the late Latin name Dominicus, meaning of the Lord. Fishbowl was part of Operation Dominic. It looks like they are sending high-altitude nuclear bombs to test the fishbowl of the Lord, i.e., the firmament. Yeah, this is definitely one of those things to make you go, Now, check this out. If you click on Operation Fishbowl, we learn about Operation Fishbowl here. It was a series of high-altitude nuclear tests in 1962 that were carried out by the United States as part of the larger Operation Dominic nuclear test program. Now, hold that thought. This is all happening. If you go and look on the Operation Dominic entry, you see the different dates. We're 1962. This is the early part of 1962. We're talking May. I mean, look at all these bombs going off. 25 April, 1962, 27 April, 2 May, 4 May, 6 May, 8 May, 9 May, 11 May, 11 May, 12 May, 14 May, 19, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all before President Kennedy's "Let's go out in the space" speech. But I think a lot of people don't realize that our first stop wasn't the moon. Even before we went to the moon, they were sending probes all of a sudden after all of this. Okay, keep the timeline in mind. Operation High Jump, Operation Deep Freeze, Bird dives, NASA's founded, Antarctic Treaty signed, Operation Dominic and Fishbowl take effect. And if you notice during President Kennedy's speech, he was talking about that they've already got probes headed to Venus. Wait a minute. We're already sending stuff to Venus and Mars? We haven't even been to the moon yet. Authors are claiming, and I think it's a reasonable claim, that if that model is true, then we know we have a circle, the circle of the Earth as described in the Bible, surrounded by Antarctica, the outer rim, that has a 200 or 300 foot ice wall, cliff, that keeps everything in, hence Operation High Jump. You got to get over that, right? So it looks like, at least from the flat earther perspective, that probably during Operation Deep Freeze, they may have found the edge of the dome, presumably anywhere from 800 to 1,200 miles inland from the coast. Then everybody pulls out, signs this treaty, says nobody can go back except under the express guidelines of the international community that signed the treaty. So then all of a sudden the United States and Russia engaged in these high altitude nuclear tests, and the United States calls theirs Operation Dominic, within which we have Operation Fishbowl.
In the exact same time period, Russia is also testing the dome. The Soviet Union's K project was a group of 5 nuclear tests conducted in 1961-62. They were all high altitude tests fired by missiles of the Kasputin Yar launch site in Russia. Operation Fishbowl was 10 shots within 5 months. Operation Fishbowl was to be bluegill, starfish, and orca. If the tests were to fail, the next attempt of the same test would be of the same name plus the word prime. They were intent on testing the dome. The first planned test of Fishbowl was June 2nd, 1962. No nuclear detonation occurred, no data was obtained. So continuing from 1958, they're having rockets go out and just lose their way, and instruments go haywire and they have to detonate it. We see this time again. Operation Starfish, June 19th, 1962. Missile flew a normal trajectory for 59 seconds and the rocket engine suddenly stopped. The range officer ordered the destruction of the missile. Some of the missile's parts fell on Johnston Island. Some of the debris was contaminated with plutonium. Lovely. Starfish Prime. The Thor missile, this is important, the Thor missile carrying the Starfish Prime warhead actually reached an apogee, maximum height, of just over 680 miles. Remember that, 680 miles. And the warhead was detonated on its downward trajectory when it had fallen to the programmed altitude of 250 miles. Now, why would you send something up 680 miles then detonate it down at 250 miles? Now, also note that all of these tests were conducted at night, mostly at midnight, in the dark of night. They wanted to see what was up there. Starfish Prime, this is very important too, Starfish Prime caused an electromagnetic pulse which was far larger than expected, so much larger that it drove much of the instrumentation off the scale, causing great difficulty in getting accurate measurements. The pulse also made effects known to the public by causing electrical damage in Hawaii some 900 miles away from the detonation point, knocking out 300 streetlights, setting off numerous burglar alarms, damaging telephone, microwave links. They had microwave back then, folk, 1961. The visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense. A very large area of the Pacific was illuminated by the auroral phenomenon. Resonant scattering of light from lithium, another wonderful metal raining down on us, and other debris was observed at Johnson and French frigate shoals for many days, confirming the long-time presence of debris in the atmosphere. The Starfish Prime radiation belt persisted at high altitude for many months and damaged United States satellites. All of these satellites failed completely within several months of the Starfish detonation. So we have an electromagnetic pulse that's sending all communication devices haywire, and they're having to destroy and fail all of their satellites and missiles. All right, so as of the beginning of 2011, the EMP waveforms and prompt gamma radiation outputs for bluegill triple prime, they had to get to triple prime in their testing. In an unclassified report, however, a subsequent theory, which is now one being used, was developed, which describes the mechanism by which the high-altitude EMP is generated. Data to confirm the EMP theory is still classified. A very large number of United States military ships were operating in support of Prime. In addition, they had some guests. An uninvited scientific expeditionary ship from the Soviet Union was stationed near Johnston Island for the test, and another Soviet scientific expeditionary ship was located in the southern Kunjaghet region. They were working together, folks. This is very important too. The electromagnetic pulse generated by a high-altitude nuclear explosion appeared to have very significant differences from the electromagnetic pulse generated by the nuclear explosions closer to the surface. So something up high changed the profile of the electromagnetic patterns. It was known from previous high-altitude tests as well as from theoretical work done in the 50s that high-altitude nuclear tests produce a number of unique geophysical phenomena at the opposite end of the magnetic field line of the Earth's magnetic field. So then in 1963, they quickly signed with the Russians. A nuclear air test ban treaty is signed, prohibiting all test detonations of nuclear weapons except underground. Shortly thereafter, JFK is assassinated. How convenient. Nikola Tesla. There is no energy in matter other than that received from the environment.